Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the inaugural event in our Sport Management Speakers Series. And we are thrilled to launch this initiative and honored to welcome one of the nation's most prominent sport and entertainment management figures, Doug Logan, to our campus. To all in attendance today, your presence, whether as a student, a faculty member, alumni, or friend of Hartwick, speaks to the growing excitement around sport management at the college and the impact it will have on our students. And in that spirit, I would also like to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to Larry Miller, class of 1973, a dedicated trustee, a loyal alum, and a steadfast supporter of your college. Larry has made a generous commitment of time and of leadership to launch the sport management program, and also, through his philanthropy, to launch this sport management lecture series. His generosity and his vision are shaping the future for all of you who are our students and future students to come. And Larry, we are incredibly grateful. Thank you. And today, I have the privilege of making a very special announcement, one that honors an extraordinary individual whose impact on Hartwick College and the world of sports is truly unparalleled. This tribute recognizes a career defined by leadership, by mentorship, and by a deep dedication to education and sport management. In recognition of Tom Meredith and his extraordinary contributions to Hartwick, I am proud to announce that the Sport Management Lecture will be named in your honor. Tom, this is a lasting testament to your influence in the field and your role in shaping future sport management professionals. And just as Tom has spent his career bringing the biggest names and events in sports to the world stage, this series will bring leading voices in sport management to Hartwick's campus, engaging students, faculty, and the broader community. This lecture series places Hartwick where it deserves to be, in the forefront of the nation's liberal arts colleges. So Tom, thank you for your belief in the power of education, the meaning of mentorship, and real-world work experience. All of this forms the foundation of this initiative, which reflects Hartwick's commitment to academic excellence and a strong tradition in athletics. With a rich legacy of athletic success and a growing sport management program, Hartwick could not have a more fitting namesake for this series than Tom, whose career embodies everything we hope to inspire in our students. Spanning more than 40 years, his career has helped shape some of the most prestigious sporting events in the world, and I want our students particularly to hear this, including the Pan American Games, the Olympics, multiple FIFA World Cups. As one of North America's foremost soccer event professionals, his expertise has been instrumental in the growth of United States soccer and the advancement of women's professional soccer. And I can tell you he's getting really angry at me as I continue to do this. Beyond his professional achievements, Tom has remained deeply committed to Hartwick. His oft-repeated words, and I quote, "Virtually everything good that's happened to me in my life is because I attended Hartwick. These words reflect his gratitude and his devotion to our institution. His invaluable guidance and support have played a key role in developing Hartwick's sport management program, ensuring that students gain the knowledge, experience, and connections to thrive in the industry. So it's only fitting that this speaker series bears his name, continuing his legacy of excellence and his legacy of opportunity, creating opportunity for generations to come. Tom, thank you for all you have done for Hartwick. It's our privilege to honor you with the naming of the speaker series, and as a point of personal privilege, Mary and I consider it an honor to be your friend.
As my English friends would say, I'm very chuffed. Thank you, if you know what that means. Jim called me about this several weeks ago, and I told him I would agree to it as long as it wasn't a Tom Meredith Memorial Speaker Series. And he was very nice to make sure that happened before I passed. Let me add to Jim's comments and welcome all of you. I knew we would have 300 people here, so we were dodging it at the beginning of the week, but thank you for coming. I think you'll really, really enjoy listening to Doug. I've been given a very exciting task, and one that I don't take lightly, the job of introducing you to someone I've known for 35 years, and I think the perfect person to be the leadoff speaker for this speaker series, which is connected to the sport management program. Some background, future speaker series events will continue on a regular basis. We'll have one next month and then a couple of next year. I haven't announced that yet, but we'll be coming to that shortly. And we'll bring to campus a number of people that have been very noteworthy in their own professional careers in the sport management and the event business. I believe firmly that Doug Logan is the perfect leadoff hitter for us. Please note that tonight and future, you will not hear from Derek Jeter or Francisco Lindor, all right? These are going to be people that you can ask, as you will be able to when Doug is finished with his talk. You'll be able to ask him questions, and I hope that you take that opportunity to do that. We're having people come to this campus that were really successful in their own business, and I believe that they make up the more important part of the sport business, those people from behind the scenes and that work in all the different functional areas. This speaker series will be about and will focus on those personalities who were the players, in quotes, on that other side. They've been instrumental in the success of any team, league, stadium, concert hall, arena, or your local aquarium. Those are the folks that make it happen so that everybody is safe and enjoys what they see. It's those driven people like Doug who I think has really made the difference in the business of sport over time. His job and the way he was looking at it all the time was his job to take an event and an idea and to put it into reality. He and his staff oversaw the budget, the promotion, the marketing, and all of the things that go into selling tickets, merch, programs. Lamar Hunt used to tell me one time that you should physically attack the consciousness of a program buyer from the time they leave their car to the time they get their seat. And he told me one time that you can't do it as a quiet person. Programs, that's how you sell a program at an event. They're the folks that are ultimately responsible for counting the money, making sure that they made some kind of net profit, or else they would find out the next day that they should go find another job. Right, Doug? And he's one of those folks that's done it all. He's been that ultimate guy in charge, and he's had a whole bunch of different venues and things and staged events in more places than just the good old USA. He's a type of person that paid attention to details. He's the guy out front when things went wrong, and he's the guy that deflected the attaboys to his staff instead of himself when things went well. He energized his staff to do things every day, over and over again, tomorrow, the next day, the day after that, and the night after that, so that it would be at the same high standard as the day they started. Ladies and gentlemen, for years, he's consistently walked about 5 miles every day, rain or shine, snow, and because I know that he's done this, is he tracks it, and he's done it for 12 or 13 years. He just told me, for example, and his reason for doing it is that he wants to circumnavigate the globe on his feet. He's now covered, as of today, 22,930 miles just as a simple devotion to walking. And I think we should give him applause for that, 13 years. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, the only reason I stay on Facebook is to read the regular musings of that man. Years ago, he wrote a Facebook piece about the Greeks, and I don't mean your best friend, the Greeks. I mean Zeus and the other folks that we learned about when we were kids. And he did it without ever looking it up in Google. Anyone in my book who has the confidence or nerve to use a word like frisson as part of the title of his speech is either, he's earned the right to be heard, but if you have to know what it means, you don't really know what it means. And he'll talk a little bit about it, and it's a part of what I have always loved about the business of sport, and he'll explain my reason for that. Does Doug know a little bit about a lot? Yes, he does. He's in his 80s, and I believe he has chosen to follow his own version of the liberal arts education that he has followed every day of his life for the last 6 decades. Ladies and gentlemen, can Doug Logan speak effectively? Yes, he can. And I ask you please to listen and enjoy Mr. Doug Logan.
It's the other F word. Failure. The 2024 college football season ended with a novel 12-team tournament. 12 worthy competitors made the cut. 1 team, Ohio State University, was the victor. 11 teams lost. Failure. The season began with 134 Division I teams. The Buckeyes won, 133 lost. Failure. In baseball, a 300 batting average is usually the basis for stardom. However, it means that the player has failed to get a base hit 7 times out of 10. Good basketball players only make about half their shots. Only 1 runner wins the race. The rest fail. Only a small percentage of Olympians get a medal. Sports, a cultural phenomenon that concludes far more often in losing than it does in winning. Sports, a business and indeed an industry where the majority of its participants fail over and over again. Teams fail. Athletes fail. Coaches fail. Management organizations fail. Athletes get benched. They get cut from their teams. They get sent down to the minors. Coaches get fired, as well as general managers and athletic directors. Big shots in the executive suites get fired too. I worked in an industry where everybody gets fired. It happened to me twice. I was hired and fired above the fold with pictures in the New York Times. Twice. It's a brutal meritocracy. Lose enough, whether it's money or games or attendance or sponsorship, and you're gone. Most people, when asked to stand up to a podium, usually open with a feel-good sentiment. And President Mullen didn't invite me here to come and spread negative thoughts. I just feel compelled to give you an honest context for what has been a magical professional career. If you choose a career in sports or entertainment, you're putting yourself in jeopardy. Let's look closer at this seesaw concept of success and failure. Rudyard Kipling, the English journalist and poet, gave advice to his son John in the form of an epic poem titled If. One couplet directly addresses the topic. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. I will tell you that that's emblazoned on the wall of the men's locker room at Wimbledon. Imposters. Success and failure are imposters. They're mere data points. Everybody succeeds. Everybody fails. You live out your life in between those two extremes. And the quality of your life is impacted on how you treat those data points. Because you achieve success in one endeavor doesn't make you a success. Conversely, to fail does not make you a failure. Why sports? Sports has become a ubiquitous cultural touchstone. They, like music, literature, media, fashion, entertainment, and art, are a part of the fabric of contemporary civilization. On a micro level, sports are storytelling. And as the author Robert McCrum says, we are a storytelling species. We respond to rivalries. We're inspired by its characters, its incessant conflicts and competition, the frisson of jeopardy. We're awed by the miracle of performance. Now, when I talk about a career in sports management, it also includes the management of all forms of live events, entertainments, theater, the spoken word, parades, festivals. Managing them professionally actually requires the same skill sets. The arc of my career can be told in stories. The great enthusiasms of achievement, the scars of setback and defeats. And this is how it began for me. I want to be that guy. I was born in 1943 in Montclair, New Jersey, of a Cuban mother and an American father. In 1944, my father enlisted in the Army and was shipped off to the South Pacific to fight in World War II. My mother took me to Cuba to live with her family for the duration of the war. I would not see my father again for 2 years. My grandfather, Mario Mendoza, was a wealthy and prominent Cuban businessman. I formed an immediate attachment to him. He became my father figure and male role model. Besides his business interests, Mario also headed up the ownership group of a Cuban baseball team, Almendares. He would take me to team practices, to games, let me roam the dugout and the locker rooms. It became my team. I saw firsthand the great enthusiasms of sports fanaticism, the great joy my grandfather's efforts would bring to the people. I was never motivated to become his third baseman, Hank Thompson, or his relief pitcher, Tommy Lasorda. I did not want to be the coach. I wanted to be Mayella, my grandfather's street nickname. I wanted to be the person who made it all happen. I vividly remember street peddlers in the morning would holler up to the balcony of my grandfather's bedroom, telling him to get a new first baseman. He would wave at them in his bathrobe, a smile on his face, a twinkle in his eye. A baseball team owner? Yes, but also a builder of community. I want to be that guy. 6 simple words that became my personal mission statement, the beginning of a lifelong quest to be that guy. Despite the fact that he died when I was 7, my yaya taught me a lot. The summer before he died, the family spent a 2-month vacation in Varadero Beach. In the evening after dinner, he would go for a walk on the beach and smoke a cigar. As the oldest grandchild, and there ultimately would be 25, I was invited to accompany him. And we had a rule. Our deal was I had permission to ask him anything. One night I mustered up the courage to ask him what was on my mind. Out of the clear blue, I asked him, "How much money do you have?" He smiled and he said, "Let me answer this way." He then proceeded to tell me that on 7 occasions he had done business deals that had net him over $1 million. But on 6 occasions, he did deals where he lost over $1 million. He then smiled mischievously and said, "I can't tell you which was more fun." In one sentence, he taught me about the 2 imposters, about the way happiness is truly measured and achieved, about success and failure. My childhood was happy and relatively ordinary. Good student, altar boy, Little League, Boy Scouts. I was an avid reader. I was curious. I played all sports, but was a mediocre athlete. I attended an all-male Catholic military boarding school for high school. One afternoon, a bunch of us were in a student lounge and talking about our goals for the future. When it was my turn, I said with a grin, "I have 3 goals. I want to make $1 million. I want to be quoted in Sports Illustrated. And I want to lose my virginity to Kim Novak." For those of you who are too young to know, she was a pulchritudinous actress lusted over by every pubescent boy in America. I graduated 5th in my class academically out of 89 and was awarded varsity letters in soccer and in football. My classmates voted me most likely to succeed, and in the fall of 1961, I enrolled in Manhattan College to study civil engineering, the family trade. Those were the days when you could pay for a substantial portion of your education with part-time jobs, and I did my part. I loaded trucks at the New York Times on 43rd Street. I tutored Spanish. I sold beer in Yankee Stadium. I answered a switchboard at night. For 3 years, I drove a cab for an 8-hour shift 5 nights a week, and I studied between fares. In February 1964, I got a memorable letter from my draft board. I was in the middle of my junior year, but those were the pre-lottery days when that didn't matter. They needed bodies, and I was needed to reach their quotas. There would be no senior year. They told me to get my affairs in order. I took the oath in September of 1964 and embarked on a 3-year military career full of challenges, risk, and jeopardy. The Army thought I had leadership potential and put me through the most harrowing of training. I was sent to officer candidate school in Oklahoma. I also was selected for elite training at the Jungle Warfare School in Panama. I received my orders for Vietnam in the summer of 1966. I remember saying goodbye to my family at LaGuardia. My mother, who was the tough family disciplinarian, looked me in the eye and said, "I'm sure you're going to make the family proud." My father, a combat veteran of Saipan and Okinawa, could only embrace me and weep because he knew. When I arrived in country, I was assigned to the most elite fighting unit, the 101st Airborne, and given the most dangerous job, artillery forward observer. What followed were 13 months that informed and defined me for the rest of my life. I became a soldier, a warrior, a leader, a motivator. That period solidified my character and gave me the tools in the life that I have led ever since. At the age of 23, I found myself responsible over the survival of 105 men who answered to me. I was forced to own that burden. I was driven by two sometimes competing objectives. First was the accomplishment of the mission, and second was the well-being of my troops. They were the values that carried over to my professional life. I returned in October of 1967. Most of the guys I trained with were either wounded or killed. I was engaged in combat for my entire tour. Multiple hell-born assaults, ambushes, firefights, close scares. I had experienced a violent case of malaria, survived horrible intestinal parasites, but I returned virtually unscathed with 5 medals, including 2 Bronze Stars for Valor. I was decommissioned in Seattle and walked a gauntlet of war protesters at Seattle-Tacoma Airport chanting, "Baby killer, baby killer." The same thing happened at O'Hare in Chicago while I was changing planes. There, one demonstrator spit on me. The next 10 years were my dark period. Picasso had his blue period, mine was just dark. I attempted to assimilate into a world that basically ignored or scorned my experiences. In other eras, I would have been embraced as a war hero. People did not want to hear my story. They offered me no salve for my psychic wounds. There was no solace. I turned inward. I resorted to medicating with alcohol. I drank. I accepted a job right away as a field superintendent in a construction company. I talked my way into law school without an undergraduate degree. I let my hair grow long. I didn't talk about my feelings. I just drank. I drank enough to mask my pain, but not so much that it impacted my employment. I juggled work, family, night school, and the empty feeling in my gut. I questioned my own humanity. I dreamed about the lives I'd impacted and sometimes terminated. I began to hate myself. I'm sure today I would have been diagnosed with PTSD, and I drank. It was a period of failure, and it lasted 10 years. I ruined a marriage, became alienated from 2 wonderful children. After 3 years of quality scholarship in law school, I dropped out in the last semester without getting a degree. And career-wise, I was stuck. I became what was known as a boomer. I drifted from project to project, known as the guy who would take on the tough ones. I was paid well, but I spent every dime. I finally hit my bottom in 1978. The night I took my last drink, I found myself sitting on a curb in front of a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning wearing only one shoe. I couldn't find the other one. I was broke and broken and realized that if I wanted to make anything out of my life, if I wanted to be like that guy, if I could ever feel any serenity or happiness, I had to get sober. I had met my match. The next day, I signed myself into an alcohol rehab program, and it saved my life. I still have residual effects from the war. I hate fireworks. They still give me flashbacks. I am still hard of hearing, the result of a grenade that was far too close. But I've learned how to lip read. I still take a seat in the far corner of a restaurant so I can see the whole room and no one can sneak up behind me. I occasionally have dreams about the carnage I caused. But on the whole, I've learned to live with myself, to forgive myself, and to face life on its terms. I own my own failings, and I know I have control of my own destiny. I took an honest inventory of myself, my talents, my strengths, my weaknesses. I dug deep to clarify my values. I asked myself, what did I truly want to do? I kept going back to the life with my grandfather. I wanted to be that guy. I resolved that I would try and make a living following my passions, music and sports. I wrote a generic job description, one for that guy. Most of my professional endeavors for the rest of my life have followed that document. The gifted Scottish philosopher Alistair MacIntyre, who lectured for years at Notre Dame, once wrote something that has stayed with me over the years. You can't know what to do until you know what story you're a part of. You have to craft your own story first. What are the contours of the life that you want to live? You have to be bold, aspire, think big. Then you have to figure out how to put yourself in that story. Be audacious, take risks, sell yourself. That's what I did at this tipping point of my life. I created a story like my grandfather's. Then I figured out how to become a part of it. I discovered a project. The second largest city in Illinois, Rockford, had a desire to build a civic center. More correctly, an entertainment and sports center. They needed a manager and a leader to get the financing, to build the building, and to manage it. I talked my way into the job. By the time I left 8 years later, the facility had hosted over 900 events, drawing over 5 million patrons. I got the venue financed and built on time and under budget. We became the downstate concert capital. In 1981, I convinced the Rolling Stones to play there on their Tattoo You Stadium tour. Kenny Rogers, Prince, Styx, Rush, REO Speedwagon, Bob Hope, Tina Turner, Aerosmith, Duran Duran, Cheap Trick, Blondie, Johnny Cash, Barry Manilow, B.B. King, they all played the Rockford Metro Center. I hosted DePaul and NIU basketball games. I promoted the very first arena football game. I presented exhibition matches with Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe. The center became the nexus of the community, particularly its younger cohort. I started to get comfortable in that job. To me, a signal to move on. You see, if I wake up in the morning thinking, I got this, my industry and creativity is reduced. However, if my first thought is, can I am more nimble, attentive, and incentivized to seek excellence. At day's end, I usually examine my performance and I decide I did or I didn't. Discomfort keeps me on my toes, creates constructive anxiety, makes me far more productive. Once the job became a rocking chair, it was time to move on. It's the concept of jeopardy. You know, that place that your mother urged you to avoid. Be safe. Avoid danger. Don't take risks. Don't climb that tree. Don't play with sticks. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Comfort, safety, avoiding risks, All these warm and cozy places are the enemy of achievement, creativity, enthusiasms, accomplishment, and success. If we avoid losing, we never put ourselves on a launching pad that leads to victory. You can be cautious and avoid scars, which, by the way, are like tattoos, but with better stories. But without scars, you will have no stories. You'll reach my age and have nothing of note to say. I titled this speech The Frisson of Jeopardy, stealing this beautiful fragment from McCrum. The constructive tension of risk is what produces great athletic performances, glorious art, prosperous businesses, and rich and enduring ideas. The absence of it generally leads to mediocrity. I once had a long conversation with the first CEO and chairman of Ticketmaster, Fred Rosen, at his home in Beverly Hills. We agreed that we were two very different people in style, in background, in business philosophy and approach. But we concluded we shared one important thing in common. We both led our professional lives at risk. We were public about our objectives. We wanted to be judged by our actions, and we were not afraid of failing. And we were thrilled by Jeopardy! Back to my story. After my Rockford successes, I decided I needed to stretch my talents and be judged on a bigger stage. I took a job in New York City managing the sports and entertainment assets of a $4 billion Fortune 500 service company, Ogden Corporation. Based on a business plan that I created, we formed a management division to privately manage sports and entertainment facilities. We also formed an events promotion company, Ogden Presents, to feed live events into our facilities. By the time I left 9 years later, we had aggregated 57 client facilities in 5 countries. We promoted not only events, but tours, including those of Michael Jackson and Neil Diamond. We promoted the very first Farm Aid concert in Champaign, Illinois. Our family of facilities included the Forum in LA, the Target Center in Minneapolis, the Javits Convention Center in New York, and major sports facilities in the UK, Germany, Canada, and Mexico. At one point, I was responsible for over 10,000 employees. I was constantly traveling. It was both exhilarating and exhausting. I left Ogden in 1993 when offered the job of CEO of the largest live event company in Mexico, Ocesa. I wanted to limit my travel and return to my Hispanic roots. The company managed facilities in Mexico City, Monterrey, and Guadalajara, including the Sports Palace, National Auditorium, a major soccer stadium, 2 amphitheaters, and 3 clubs. We promoted shows by the Rolling Stones, Madonna, Pink Floyd, U2, Paul McCartney, and Billy Joel, among others. When I arrived, all ticketing in Mexico was done primitively with pieces of paper. I negotiated with Fred Rosen and acquired the Ticketmaster franchise for the entire country, bringing modern computerized controls to our distribution systems. The scalpers hated us. In late 1994, disaster struck suddenly. The government decided to devaluate the peso against the dollar, and our business model collapsed. We were buying talent in dollars and selling tickets in pesos, and the math didn't work. I worked day and night to save the business. I scaled back a workforce of 540 people to 150. Shed dollar-denominated expenses, sought dollar-based revenue sources. We turned our ticketing phone room into a phone hub for Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Bergdorf Goodman. The company exists to this day, large and profitable, but it was touch and go. I sold my equity interest and returned to the States. the company had shrunk to a point that it couldn't afford to have me on the payroll. I had no job. I did some consulting. I had no idea where my next landing spot would be. Then I got a phone call that changed my life. The call from a headhunter came late in the summer of 1995. Was I interested in being considered for the job of CEO and commissioner of Major League Soccer, the new professional league that was formed in the wake of the 1994 World Cup? I initially was non-committal. I asked myself, was I qualified? After thinking about what better way to be that guy, I took the plunge and said yes. The search started with 110 resumes. I made the cut to 10, then was one of 4 asked to interview. After a harrowing 3-hour interview in front of a powerful search committee, I thought I would not be chosen. I was offered the job the next day. I began working the week after Thanksgiving, and it was a daunting challenge. Within 15 weeks, we had to be ready to play in 10 cities from Boston to Los Angeles. Rosters had to be fixed, players put under contract, stadiums had to be modified, sponsorships had to be sold, media deals had to be done. I don't have words to express the steep climb. I lived on airplanes, always late night flights so I could get a full day's work in the next day. I answered to a nine-person board of governors, 4 of whom were billionaires. The first time I had to fine one of them for breaking rules, I was sure I was going to be fired the next day. Being CEO of a startup becomes a very lonely existence. Even though you're surrounded by people all the time, you feel the weight of huge personal responsibility, a burden you can't really share with others. I felt the entire country and the global soccer community was counting on me for success in this venture. It was at once overwhelming and exhilarating. We hit it out of the park in the first season. We averaged attendance of over 17,000 a game, got decent TV ratings, began to convince people that we were for real. Our MLS Cup game in Foxborough drew over 35,000 in the pouring rain. We, the managers and administrators, were exhausted. However, we needed to get back to work right away. Sports startups always have sophomore jinxes. The next 3 years were rather flat. Reality set in. All comparable sports took decades to put in place as institutions, and I quickly recognized we would be no different. I focused on only 2 goals. One was to do everything possible to enable play for another season. The second was to maintain the veneer of inevitability. I was convinced the league would survive and ultimately thrive. It would just take longer and be more expensive than the original planners thought. My ownership group was not happy to hear that news. After the first season, they became convinced that they had a breakthrough asset, that huge success was around the corner. Now, sports entrepreneurs are a strange breed. They frequently act like owners of racehorses. If things are going badly, it's always the fault of the jockey, never the horse. It's always the deficiency in the guy, not a flaw in the business model. And they all do the same thing at first. They get a new jockey. After 4 seasons, I was told my contract would not be extended, and they replaced me with a capable executive from the NFL. They were very generous and respectful of my service. I loved that job and sincerely wished I could have stayed longer, but I knew the risk going in. High ceiling, low floor. The price you pay to play on Broadway. I had a little money in my pocket and a couple of itches I wanted to scratch. So I helped launch a soccer-based web portal in Spain. I produced and partially owned a touring circus, Circo Fantastico. No animals, presented in a tent, all Hispanic performers. I formed a company to exploit stored value cash cards, a technology developed in the Netherlands. I formed another company to facilitate cultural and sports exchanges in Cuba, my motherland. I tried to launch a company to monetize a facial animation tool developed by Disney. I was a consultant in the relocation of the Montreal Expos. I was a talent advisor to a Venezuelan live event company. I drafted a business plan for a professional rugby league in this country. I grew my archive of stories. Professionally, I chased my curiosities. I met a lot of smart people and more than a few lunatics. In 2008, I was recruited to take the job of CEO of USA Track and Field, the national governing body of the sport. Peter Uberoth, a friend and chair of the United States Olympic Committee, urged me to pursue the job. The enterprise needed a complete reinvention. They were plagued by repeated doping scandals, in need of long-term financing, afflicted by some tawdry internal corruption, beginning to lose their dominant competitive position in the sport. I took the job in midsummer and led the national team to the Beijing Olympics. After a month in China, I returned to institute a list of reforms. We completely changed the governance and bylaws of the organization. We eliminated the existing governing board and seated a new one. I impaneled an ad hoc performance review committee whose recommendations, when adopted, completely changed the athlete development culture. I took away discretionary grants that were benefiting only the grantees. And I negotiated a 4-year endorsement contract with Nike at 4 times the prior fee. It was a high wire act. I knew full well that ultimately the reformer gets bumped off. It was only a matter of time. I was protected by a pretty good contract, but I also pissed off an awful lot of people. They finally got me. They fired me and refused to pay me out my contract. They owed me nearly $2 million. I had to go to federal court to get my money. So here I was, 68 years old, some money in my pocket, and a ton of adventures all over the world and the stories that went with them. Dr. Seuss promised us, oh, the places you'll go. It seems like an apt title for my professional life. The places I have gone, the people I have met, the history I have witnessed. At times I feel a bit like Forrest Gump. I've had lunch with Henry Kissinger and Placido Domingo in a restaurant in Paris, and we spent 2 hours talking about soccer. I was seated at a dinner party between Bob Dylan and Neil Diamond, and I never understood a word of their weed ad-lib mumbling. I was a guest of the Rolling Stones at a private party on a riverboat in New Orleans where I danced to a 20-minute rendition by Stephen Stills of Love the One You're With. I watched a soccer match seated next to Diego Maradona. Attended a Super Bowl with Wayne Gretzky as my guest. Sat next to Peyton Manning at the ESPYs. Was the guest of Mexican President Salinas for a performance of Carmina Burana. I hugged Debbie Phelps, Michael's mother, after his 7th gold medal in the Ice Cube in Beijing. I met with Bill Clinton in the Oval Office where his dog Buddy jumped on my lap and got hair all over my blue suit. I had dinner in a Tex-Mex joint with Billy Gibbons, Frank Beard, and Dusty Hill of ZZ Top. I had the dubious honor of following the Reverend Jesse Jackson to a podium, where he was great and I stunk. I had lunch with Frank Zappa, where he tried to get me to invest in a casino in Gorky Park in Moscow. I shared a seat on a plane in Europe with Usain Bolt where he asked for career advice. I had dinner with Sting in Chicago where he talked about his days as a school teacher. I was asked to run 3 miles with the Olympic torch in Canada for the Vancouver Games. I was the guest of George Steinbrenner on Yankees opening day. I ran a marathon under 4 hours. I biked a 100-mile century in a bit over 5. I crossed the Pyrenees in 1 day at the age of 75 with a 30-pound pack on my back. My father and both my grandfathers all died at the age of 57. I have outlived them by 25 years and counting. I have had 3 credible death threats in 3 different jobs. I've been shot at, and I've shot back. I had to take Steve Tyler of Aerosmith to have drugs pumped out of his stomach so he could perform. I had to bail Carlos Santana out of jail in Mexico for trying to smuggle drugs into the country. At a private party, I sat between Willie Mays and Joe DiMaggio, my childhood idols. 3 weeks later, I fired the 2 of them as ambassadors of my company. Bette Midler pulled her skirts up above her waist in a dressing room to show me the mosquito bites on her thighs. Tina Turner flirted with me backstage after a 2-hour performance. But I never ever met Kim Novak. You've been a wonderful, wonderful audience. I am honored to be here and honored on a night where my good friend Tom was being honored also. I'd like to take a period of time and be receptive to answering questions from the floor.
So I was taught a long time ago, when you're listening to people talk and you're in a group, and I was listening as much to Doug as I was to all of you, and you were very, very attentive. And that is a tribute to the folks in this room. Thank you for that. Okay, we're gonna be handing mics out. I'm gonna ask you to stand up when you want to talk. They'll get the mics to you. I'll point, and we'll do this for about 15 minutes. So who's first? Please stand up, ask a question. Don't ask him how much money he's got in his pocket, though, okay? Don't do that one. Anybody? Right there. Go ahead, sir. Stand up. Help us, please. Thank you.
So, Doug, I'm a soccer fan. So, what was it like in that interview to become commissioner of MLS?
It was, I have to tell a story out of school, and it was very, very weird. When I walked into the interview, there were four people that were being interviewed at once. See, I'm driving them out by the score. Four people
Curfews,
being
Doug,
interviewed.
curfews.
4 people being interviewed on the first day. I was 4th. And by the time I walked into the interview room, there was, lunch dishes, there was all sorts of stuff, and a lot of stale air. And I was given the opportunity to make some opening remarks, which I had prepared for. I talked a little bit about my desire for what I was looking for in the job and how I thought that I thought my talents matched up to it. Lamar Hunt, who was, probably America's preeminent sportsman. I mean, there's no other way of describing him, having been involved in the NBA and soccer and in the NFL with the Kansas City team. He was sitting on one side and his son was sitting on the other. They were both on in that committee. And very quickly I realized that Lamar Hunt had fallen asleep during the period of time that I was talking. unbeknownst to me, he had traveled all night long from a game that had taken place in Kansas City, and we were in Dallas. And he fell asleep. I mean, and he wasn't nodding, he was out, you know? And this is, so I looked at him, and the following thoughts went through my head. Number one, I have just put America's preeminent sportsman to sleep. Number two, I'm not getting this job. You know, there's just no way I'm getting this job. But the third thing was the most important thing of all. And that is, I am going to treat this as an exercise in poise. I'm not going to let him throw me off my game. So that I acted as though he was, and his son, Clark, was coughing on the other side of the room, trying to wake his dad up, right? He was able to wake his dad up 3 different times by coughing and by doing something. And his dad raised up and proceeded to ask me a question that I'd answered already. And without any hesitation, I didn't say anything about that. I answered the question again, and he nodded his head and fell back asleep again. Little did I know that this, elderly gentleman had flown all night long to try and get to this, and this was the 4th interview, and he fell asleep. So at the end, the people who were there, who witnessed it, said, I walked out with this grin on my face. I looked like I was laughing, and I was, because it was, there's no way I'm getting this job. And then a day later, I got offered the job, so it was kind of interesting. But I don't know whether that answers what you're looking for.
Real quick, the folks that left have a 6 o'clock lift tomorrow as athletes.
I know.
And they're college students,
That's all right. That's all right.
So let me do a counterpoint.
They're all dressed in shorts too, so they're probably going to work out or do.
Yeah. Let me do a counterpoint real quick to the best human being I have ever met, Lamar Hunt. And I was interviewed one time, and I said that, and I believe it. He is the coolest gentleman. I never heard him raise his voice in 35 years, ever.
Wonderful, wonderful man. He wrote me, when he was diagnosed with cancer, he wrote me a handwritten 8-page letter talking, first of all, business-wise, how he was putting his affairs in order, and secondly, expressing sentiments that it's one of the treasured documents that I have. Wonderful, wonderful.
6,000 people at his funeral. 6,000. So I was interviewed one time, and the person asked me the most endearing person that I've met in my life, and I said Lamar Hunt. My wife read that story, and she said, "What about me?" Thinking real fast, I said, they were talking about business, hon, not personal life. Covered it. Okay, who else? Who we got? Anybody?
Someone in the back.
Stand up. Thank you.
I just have to ask, what your biggest regret is.
What?
What's your biggest regret?
Biggest regret in your life.
Biggest regret? Whoa.
We only have 10 minutes.
There is a great French song that says that the title of the song is "I Have No Regrets," and I can tell you honestly, looking you straight in the eye as far back as you are, I have none.
Good answer. Yep. Anybody else? What do we have? Raise your hand, stand up, please.
Obviously, you're a very successful businessman and entrepreneur. And if you had to describe one trait that has gotten you to the place that you are today, what would it be?
I am relentless. I'm not the smartest guy, okay? I'm not the most talented guy. I am relentless. I also have a short attention span. I mean, I haven't put all of the places that I have been in my talk today, and the way of describing my professional life is that I've lived on this pond with lily pads, and I'm the frog, and I land on a lily pad and really like it there, but also I see one over there, and I'll go and I'll hop on that one, so that, my brother died early in life. He died at the age of 45 as CEO of the company that he went to work for as an intern when he was 17 years old. Just stayed in one place all his life. I've taken a bite of life in a wide variety of places, and for some godforsaken reason, I have the confidence that I can learn enough to be competent at something that attracts me. If that's an answer,
I know Doug has done this many times, and I tell young people like you, is that you have to stand in front of the mirror, whether that night or the next morning. What did I screw up? What did I do right? And how did I do? And what can I learn from it? I have done that myself for the 50 years I have been in this business.
Let me add one additional thing. It's people who are good at what they do seem like they do it effortlessly. Okay, it seems like it just comes natural. Okay, every opportunity that I have embarked on, I go through a mental dress rehearsal of what if. What if this happened? I'm going to tell you today. If there were an active shooter in this audience, I have a game plan for how to deal with it as the guy behind the microphone. Because that's a part of my preparation, is to try and figure out. It's easy to deal with the best case. It's harder to dig down deep and say, what if this happens? What is your responsibility? And my responsibility is to draw the attention this way so you stay safe. And I've already gone through what I would do, okay? And so preparation for a speech like this in today's modern world does not involve just knowing what your lines are. It's thinking through the horrible alternatives that happen far too often, and then having a plan for that. And I'm a planner.
You'll learn this if you stay in the sport business, is when somebody says to you, don't worry, that'll never happen, run the opposite way as fast as you can, because it will sometime in some place. And like Doug says, you got to be prepared for that. And the other one is, don't lose your cool while all around you are losing theirs. They trust when you are responsible for 90,000 people at the LA Coliseum. That could just about bury you if you look at it that way. And it's really hard to make it a different type of story. What else? Who else? Questions?
How did you manage to talk your way into such prominent roles without any relevant experience?
Talk my way into what?
Yeah, you said you landed some prominent job roles over the course of your career without any actual experience, so I'm curious to know.
I've learned to, I'm not bashful, and I know what qualities I bring to the fray, and I know the ones that I don't. And I have no problems with selling myself, but it requires, one of the things, I love talking to young people because you're at a point in time where you really have got to start thinking in these terms. You're in a position where right now you're absorbing, you're reading, you're being taught, you're a taker, and very, very quickly at a certain tipping point, not too far away, you're going to be required to be a giver. You know, you're going to be required to take all that taking in and reverse it and be a giver. It's very, very interesting how the mechanics of learning and then doing all of a sudden take a leap. And one of the worst ages you're ever going to hit. I'm 80, right? I floated between 79 and 81. I mean, there's no difference. Turning 30 was abysmal for me because I was no longer the kid. I no longer had the advantage of it. Even in Vietnam, I was the kid, battery executive officer, forward observer, hot shot, but I was still a kid. The day when you'd stop becoming a kid, and in this society it's stretched out, I did things in my early 20s that you guys didn't have the exposures to and didn't have to do, thank God, in many cases. But when you no longer become a kid and when you've got to stand up there and say, okay, judge me on what I just did, not on what I promised to do or not what, I can be forgiven for this because I'm young, When you take that hat and when you got to put it with brim forward, right now you got to brim back. But when you go brim forward, oh, you're almost an adult, You're working on being an adult. And when you start being judged as an adult, it's a whole new ballgame. No, that one, what we do with that one is we discount your mental ability completely.
I think on that note, which is a good one, you want to say?
I want to say one thing to you. There's an old Green Day song, okay, and I'm dating myself, but there's a great Green Day song, and it leaves me with the coda to this speech, and there's a great lyric that ends most of the choruses in that Green Day song, and it's, "And may you have the time of your life." And I wish that for all of you, and you've been a very generous audience. Thank you very much.
My friends, I can't think of a better inaugural Meredith lecture than you just heard. And to every student in this room, you've had the great privilege of hearing tonight from the best in the business. And he is generous enough to come to Hartwick and share with you. So thank you for being here. There's a reception outside. The conversations continue. And go Hawks. Thank you very much.